Our topic, solving quadratics by factoring, just like yesterday. Day 2. Solving quadratics by factoring, day 2. All right. Today's the 24th. And there's no steps for solving today because we went over all the steps yesterday. So anything that we need to know how to do today, we saw on the notes yesterday. So we're just going to jump right in and start factoring. So our first example says 3x squared plus 9x minus 12. Now this might look like a slip and slide factoring method, but it actually isn't. Does anybody know why? Why is this one not slip and slide? Alicia? There is a GCF, exactly. And yesterday I reminded you all with this paper here, anytime you factor, first thing you should do, look for a GCF. So no matter what, if there's 2 terms, if there's 3 terms, if there's 4 terms, it doesn't matter, always look for a GCF. First, the GCF of those 3 terms would be 3. So we can divide out of 3, which will give us x squared plus 3x minus 4 in parentheses and then equals 0. So always look for a GCF first. Then we're going to go ahead and factor the trinomial on the inside here. And this is a basic trinomial. This is not slip and slide anymore. So we need 2 numbers that'll multiply to a -4 and add to a +3. 4 and -1, yeah. So 4 and -1 are the 2 factors that we're going to use here. So that'll be 3 times x plus 4 times x minus 1 equals 0. And if we're solving for x, then both of these sets of parentheses will be set equal to 0. This 3 on the outside, by the way, doesn't influence the problem in any way because there's no variable with it. So we don't actually have to do anything with that variable or that number 3 on the outside because there's no variable with it. So we're just solving x plus 4 equals 0 and x minus 1 equals 0. And so for the first set of parentheses here, the x plus 4 equals 0, subtract 4 from each side, x equals -4. The second one, add 1 to both sides, x equals 1. Those are the answers for problem number 1, or example 1. So try example 2 then. It's very similar to example 1. In fact, it's the same exact process. Look for a GCF first. All right. I'm going to be calling on some folks for this one. So be ready to have an answer for some stuff here. So let's see. There's a lot of people gone today, but Esteban, what's our GCF on this problem here? What are those each divisible by? What do you think? 10? These two definitely are, but the 5 isn't quite big enough to be divided by 10. So 2 works for these two again. 5, yeah, good. 2 works for those two, but not for the 5. But 5 works for every single one. So divide by 5 across all 3 of those. Thank you, nice work. So 5, and then that's x squared minus 20 divided by 5 would be 4, so 4x. And then 60 divided by 5 would be minus 12. So 5 times x squared minus 4x minus 12. So that means we need 2 numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 4. Devin, what 2 numbers would multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 4? All right, we need equals 0 because we're talking about an equation. So just give me 2 numbers that multiply to equal 12. 3 and 4, okay. So if we try 3 and 4, and they're multiplying to a negative, what does that tell us about one of those numbers? Exactly. And because it's adding to a negative, then the larger number has to be the negative one, right? So if it's a negative 4, the multiplication would work, but does that work for adding to negative 4? No, okay. What other 2 numbers multiply to equal 12? And? Yeah, all right. So 2 and 6, which one would be negative? Okay. It works for the multiplication. Does that work for the addition? Yeah, all right. So 2 and negative 6. So we're going to have 5 times x plus 2 times x minus 6 equals 0. And because there are no numbers in front of x in either one of these, we can just take the opposite value of each of the numbers with x, and those will be our answers. So, Maddie, what are the answers for example 2 here? Yeah, x equals 6 and x equals negative 2. Awesome. So that's it for example 2. Any questions on any of those first 2 before we go on to example 3? All right. Example 3 then. Look for a GCF. Do we have one? No. All right. What method do we have to use then if there's no GCF and there's still a number in front of x squared? Slip and slide. All right. So the slip and slide method is right here. And the slip and slide method says that we slip the value of a, or the number in front of x squared, to the end and multiply it by c. So we're going to take our value of a, the number in front of x squared, so 2, slip it to the end, multiply it by that negative 5. That's our first step. So that'll give us x squared plus 3x, and then 2 times negative 5 would be minus 10, and then equals 0. The next step is to factor this basic trinomial. So we need 2 numbers that multiply to a negative 10 and add to positive 3. 5 and negative 2, good. So that'll be x plus 5 times x minus 2. Now, we are not going to just go ahead and set those equal to 0 and solve for x, because the slip and slide method still has more steps before we're done factoring. What do we do next? Does anybody remember the next step for slip and slide factoring? Gillian? Divide the 5 and the negative 2 by 2, because we're dividing both of those factors by the value that was slipped to the end. Good. So we take this 2, and we're going to divide both of those numbers by that 2. So divide by 2, divide by 2. Now, if it does not divide evenly, like 5 over 2 does not divide evenly, and there's still a denominator left, this is the slide portion of slip and slide. We slide the denominator value in front of the variable. So that will give us 2x plus 5. And then this one divides evenly, so that would be times x minus 1. And then equals 0. Now we're done factoring. Now we can set the two sets of parentheses equal to 0 and solve for x. The 2x plus 5, that'll be 2 steps. This one will be 1 step. So we'll set up our equations, and that'll be 2x plus 5 equals 0, and x minus 1 equals 0. For the x minus 1 equals 0, just add 1 to both sides, and x equals 1. For this one, it's 2 steps, so we have to subtract 5 from both sides first, so that would be 2x equals negative 5. And then divide both sides by 2, so that would be x equals negative 5 halves. So the two answers here, x equals negative 5 halves, and x equals 1. So that's it for example 3. Are there any questions on that one before we continue? All right, example 4. Do we have a GCF on number 4? 8, 22, and 5. Can those be divided by the same thing? No. All right. So once again, slip and slide. So take our value of A, slip it to the end, multiply it by C. 8 times 5 is 40. So that'll be x squared minus 22x plus 40 equals 0. Two numbers that multiply to positive 40 and add to negative 22. What do we think? Multiply to positive 40, add to negative 22. Negative 20 and negative 2. Good. So still works. Okay. Negative 20 and negative 2. Good. Negative 20 times negative 2 is positive 40. Negative 20 plus negative 2 is negative 22. So we're looking at x minus 20 times x minus 2 equals 0. Again, we can't just set these equal to 0 yet and solve for x. We still have to divide by the value that was slipped to the end. So we have to divide these both by 8. Neither of those divide out evenly, but they both reduce. What does 20 over 8 reduce to? 5 over 2, yeah. If you ever get stuck on the reducing, just use the fraction button on this. So the n over d, numerator over denominator, push that button. 20 over 8, there it is, 5 over 2. You're always welcome to do that. So 5 over 2, so that's a 2. This becomes a 5, which means we are sliding the 2 in front of the x, which will give us 2x minus 5 after we reduce that. 2 over 8 reduces to what? 1/4. So 1/4, slide the 4 in front of the x, and we are now looking at 4x minus 1. So we got 2x minus 5 and 4x minus 1. Now we're going to write our two equations and solve for x. Now these are both going to be two-step equations. So 2x minus 5 equals 0, 4x minus 1 equals 0. Add 5 to both sides, so 2x equals 5. divide by 2, and x equals 5/2. On the other one, add 1 to both sides. 4x equals 1. And then divide by 4, and x equals 1/4. Now, let's think about this for a second. Do you see anywhere on our paper where we already had those two fractions? Killian? Yeah, they weren't the exact fractions, but they were the opposites, right? This was a -5/2 when we reduced it. And the answer was +5/2. This was a -1/4 when we reduced it, and the answer is 1/4. So this fraction here and the answer here, these should always be opposites. And it happened on the last one too. +5/2 for this fraction, and then -5/2 for the answer. So when you're using slip and slide, the fractions that you get on your second to last step of factoring should always be opposite of the answer in your final answer. So -2/2 reduces to -1, and the answer was 1. 20/8 reduces to 5/2, -5/2, and the answer was 5/2. So there are things that you can kind of check along the way to see if you're doing these correctly or not. All right, let's continue on. We got some more problems to work through here. And I think we're just going to do 2 more from this first page. Let's work on number 1. And let's work on number 3. So cross off 2, cross off 4. We're working on 1, and we're working on 3 from the rest of this first page. So problem number 1. Do we have a GCF? Yeah, what is it? 2. So divide out of 2, and we're looking at 2 times x squared plus 5x plus 4 equals 0. So this one will be a little bit quicker because we are not using slip and slide, because what we are actually factoring is a basic trinomial. So we need 2 numbers that multiply to 4 and add to 5. What 2 numbers would multiply to 4 and add to 5? 2 and 2 doesn't work because 2 plus 2 is 4, but what else? What else multiplies to 4? 1 and 4, yeah, 4 and 1. 4 times 1, 4 plus 1. So 2 times x plus 4 times x plus 1 equals 0. And we're done factoring now, and the answers are just going to be the opposite of whatever's in the parentheses because the x's don't have numbers in front of them. So x equals -4, x equals -1. And going back to yesterday, I just want to remind everybody again what we are actually doing. We are figuring out, if we were to graph these, we're figuring out where these parabolas cross the x-axis. Just like we did last week, we're still figuring out the same thing, just using a different way of figuring it out. We're skipping number 2. Take a look at number 3. Do we have a GCF on number 3? No. All right. So slip and slide. Here we go. Okay. Jose, what's 3 times 10? 30. All right. So x squared plus 13x minus 30 equals 0. Slip the first number to the end, multiply it by c. X squared plus 13x minus 30. I need 2 numbers now that will multiply to -30 and add to 13. Be careful on this one. (15) and -2. Good. It's not a combination of 3 and 10. You might think it's a combination of 3 and 10 because 10 plus 3 is 13 and 10 times 3 is 30. But if it's going to multiply to a negative, one of those numbers has to be negative. So 15 and -2 are the ones that work here. So x plus 15 times x minus 2 equals 0. Can we just set these equal to 0 and solve for x now? Nope. Because we're doing slip and slide. So these both have to be divided by the value that was slipped. So we have to divide them by 3. 15 divided by 3, does that divide evenly? Yeah, it's 5. So x plus 5. And then what's our second set of parentheses going to be? Three x minus 2. Slide the denominator in front of the x. That fraction does not reduce. So that would be 3x minus 2. Now, our answer here should end up being the opposite of that fraction. So we should get a positive 2/3 for x when we solve this. And over here, our answer should be the opposite of 15/3, which would be -5. So, and this x is just by itself anyway. There's nothing in front of it. So we can just write x equals -5. But then the other one, we'll write 3x minus 2 equals 0. And then when we solve that, we should get positive 2/3. So if we add 2 to both sides, that would be 3x equals 2. And then divide by 3, and sure enough, x equals 2/3. So x equals -5 and x equals 2/3 for problem number 3. All right, do we have any questions on those? Okay, so I'm going to keep going ahead here a little bit. Let's skip ahead to, we're just going to do 4, and we're going to start with number 9. So I'm going to skip ahead, we're going to go to number 9. So 5, 6, 7, and 8, don't worry about those. Those are all just slip and slide for 5, 6, 7, and 8. With no GCFs either. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 9. What do we have to do first on problem number 9? What's our first step here? What do we think? Add 2, good. The first thing when you are solving these is to make sure that it's equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, make it equal to 0. Get rid of the -2, so we add 2 to both sides. So plus 2, 2's canceled there, and that'll give us 3x squared plus 7x plus 2. Remember that this 2 cannot combine with the 3x squared or the 7x because they're not like terms, so we just add it on to the end. Now we look for a GCF. Is there a GCF? No. All right, so slip and slide it is. Slip the 3 to the end, multiply by 2. So I would like, let's see. Who's going to help me out here? I already asked. Let's see. Hey, Seuss, what's my next line going to say? What's the next line going to say? Yep. Yep. Good. And then equals 0. Good. Okay. So Diego, once you have that written down, help me out with figuring out 2 numbers that multiply to 6 and add to 7. What 2 numbers can you think of that multiply to 6? 3 and, okay. Does 2 plus 3 equal 7? No. Okay. What other 2 numbers multiply to equal 6? Or, yeah. 6 times 1. Does 6 plus 1 equal 7? Yeah. Those work. 6 plus 1 is 7. 6 times 1 is 6. All right. So, let's see. Not here. Not here. A lot of people are done today. Let's see. Saul, what's the next line going to say? Good. So x plus 6 times x plus 1 equals 0. All right. And then after that, Gabriella, what do we have to do next? All right. So I would say yes if we started here on the x squared plus 7x plus 6. But because we have the slip and slide, what do we do? Good. Divide these both by 3. Excellent. So we're going to divide those both by 3. And then does 6 divide by 3 evenly? Yeah. What does it equal? 2. All right. So we got x plus 2. And then what do we have to do with our second set of parentheses? Who can tell me that? Elena, what do we do with our second set of parentheses? 3x plus 1. Good. We still have a denominator here, so that has to slide in front of the x, so 3x plus 1. So we should be looking at answers of the opposite of 6 divided by 3, which would be -2, and the opposite of 1/3, which would be -1/3 for our final answers. Let's find out if those work. So x plus 2 equals 0. Yeah, that's just -2 for x. 3x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract 1 from both sides. That'd be 3x equals -1. And then divide both by 3, and that is -1/3. All right, so x equals -2 and x equals -1/3. Nice. Okay, let's look at, tell you what, we'll skip 10, we'll just do 11 and 12 and we'll call it good. I want to make sure you got a decent amount of time to work today. So skip 10, look at number 11. What is the first thing that we need to do on number 11? What do you think? What's that? We'll look for a GCF after we do something first. Plus 5, yeah, we got to get the whole thing equal to 0 first. So plus 5, and again, the 5 cannot combine with the 2x squared or the 12x squared or the 32x because it does not have a variable. So we're looking at 12x squared plus 32x plus 5 equals 0. Now we can look for a GCF. Is there a GCF? No. Okay. So once again, straight to the slip and slide method. Take the value of a, slip it to the end, multiply it by c. What's 12 times 5? 60. All right. So x squared plus 32x plus 60 equals 0. What two numbers would multiply to 60 and add to 32? 30 and 2, yeah. 30 times 2 is 60, 30 plus 2 is 32. So we can factor that basic trinomial and we'll get x plus 30 times x plus 2, and then equals 0. Are we allowed to just set these equal to 0 and solve for x? No? Okay, what do we have to do, Angel? Yeah, divide these both by 12. Good. So divide by 12, divide by 12. Now, do either of those divide evenly? No. Okay. What would 30 divided by 12 reduce to? What's that? 2.5? Yeah, 5 over 2. Yes. So they're each divisible by 6. 30 divided by 6 is 5, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. Which means that we will then slide the 2 in front of the x, and that will be 2x plus 5. And the other one, 2 over 12, what does that reduce to? 1/6. There's a 1 and a 6. Slide the 6 in front of the x. And we're looking at 6x plus 1, and then equals 0. All right. So we have factored this. And again, our answers, if you're getting used to this, you can just go ahead and write your answers because it's going to be the opposite of the fraction from the previous step. If the fraction is 5 over 2, then x is going to equal the opposite of that of -5 over 2. This one here is a fraction of 1/6. So if you take the opposite of that, x will equal -1/6. And you're welcome to do that. If you recognize that pattern now, you're welcome just to take the opposite of the fraction from the previous step and not write out the equation and solve the two-step equation. So that's something you're comfortable doing, feel free to do that. All right, last one, number 12. I'd like you to try that one on your own. Take a few minutes on it. If you have questions, let me know, and then we'll check in a few minutes, and I'll get you your assignment after that. Does anybody have an answer? We'll go back and work through it. Anybody have an answer for number 12? Kelly, what'd you get? So what'd you get? 2 and negative 1/4. Actually got the opposite of those. Let's find out. So let's see. First thing, what do we do? What's our first step on number 12? What do we have to do first here? Somebody let me know. Yeah, subtract x squared and subtract the 2. Okay, so those will cancel out. And if we subtract x squared and we subtract 2 from the other side, the x squared can be subtracted from the 5x squared because those are like terms. So that'd be 4x squared. The 2 can't be subtracted from anything. So that'll be plus 7x and then minus 2 equals 0. All right. Looking for a GCF, there isn't one. So slip and slide, take the 4. Slip it to the end, multiply it by the 2 or the negative 2. So that'll be x squared plus 7x minus 8 equals 0. So what two numbers would multiply to negative 8 and add to 7? What's that? Oh, I think I see what happened. They're adding to positive 7. So we're going with positive 8 and negative 1 instead. So because negative 8 and 1 would be negative 7 if we added, so we need a positive 8 and negative 1. So that'll be x plus 8 and x minus 1 equals 0. Now what? Divide by 4. Good. So these both get divided by 4. All right. 8 divides by 4, it's 2. So that would be x plus 2. And then 1/4 doesn't reduce at all. So we slide the 4 in front of the x, and that'll be 4x minus 1, and then equals 0. So we're looking at x equals negative 2, because it's the opposite of this, because there's no number in front of x. And then the other one will just be the opposite of the fraction from the previous step. So the opposite of negative 1/4 would be positive 1/4. Those are our answers for that last one, number 12. Negative 2, positive 1/4. All right. That's it for the notes for today.